On 5 News, stopping stalkers in their tracks. New Asbo-style plans to prevent predators who torment their victims. One woman tells us she was terrified.
No one should live in fear and no one should be trapped in their own home. It is very much like a life sentence because you always have to look over your shoulder.
Also this evening, a lifeline for Port Talbot. A deal's just been done to secure the future of the Tata Steel plant in South Wales, saving thousands of jobs. 75 years on, the survivors of Pearl Harbor return to remember their fallen comrades. Drugs giant Pfizer's accused of ripping off the NHS and hit with a record fine. And
if every day was Christmas and I can be with you.
Cruising up the charts, David and Victoria Beckham's son releases his debut single, aged 11. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. Prolonged and terrifying campaigns of abuse, victims too afraid to leave their homes. Stalking is said to affect 20% of women at some point in their lives and 10% of men. Today, the government announced plans to tackle it. Offenders could be ordered to keep away from their targets or have their internet use restricted. Peter Lane reports.
Okay, how long has this been happening for you?
Helplines, charities and the police are dealing with more reports of stalking than ever.
And has this person ever destroyed or vandalised any of your other property?
Just 4 years after stalking was made a specific criminal offence, the Home Secretary has launched stalking protection orders, which can be triggered before any arrests or criminal proceedings begin.
An example might be stopping them hanging around outside the house. It might be not having access to their computer. This will be a good way of stopping things becoming much more serious. It's a way for the police to act before things escalate, because sometimes they really can escalate in a terrible way.
1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men will be stalked at some point in their lives. Almost 14,000 calls have been made to the National Helpline since it was launched 6 years ago. And in the 12 months to June, police recorded more than 4,000 stalking offences, an increase of 32% on the previous year.
He had cameras in the house that we shared together. He had a camera watch with a microphone on as well. He put a tracker in my car. He would blow smoke through my door in the middle of the night. He put footprints in the snow when it snowed, leading to and from my house.
We're protecting this woman's identity and we'll call her Sarah. She knows the impact of stalking and likes the sound of the new protection orders, but does have questions.
It's concerning because is it just a shop window? Is it something that looks brilliant on a headline? Have we got the resource to back it up? Have we got the professionals who are being trained on the new orders? Do the victims know what they're really going to do?
It means you are forced to change your life routine for months or even years.
With ads like this, there's even more awareness now of stalking, giving more people confidence to report it. But as Sarah knows, long after it's stopped, the impact is still there.
No one should live in fear and no one should be trapped in their own home. It is very much like a life sentence because you always have to look over your shoulder.
Peter Lane speaking there to one victim of stalking. Now, in the past hour or so, a deal has been struck to secure thousands of jobs for British steelworkers. Union leaders were meeting bosses at Tata Steel in Port Talbot in South Wales this afternoon to try to thrash out a future for the plant. Well, Dominic Reynolds is in Port Talbot now. And Dom, it appears they've managed it.
They have managed it. It clearly wasn't easy. Tense was the word that someone who was there used to describe it to me. And it certainly, from our side, took time. We were expecting a deal at 12 o'clock today. We were told then it was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Finally, a little more than an hour ago, we got word that a deal has been done.
This year, in this town, they've needed nerves of steel. For 10 months, the future of the plant Port Talbot is built around has been unknown. Owner Tata said it wanted out of UK steel making back at the start of the year. Now, weeks before the end of 2016, it's made a deal to stay and keep up to 4,000 people in work.
What this has done is secured production, 2 furnaces, for a period that then gives us time to plan and reflect and make sure that the union is still in there fighting for continued production after that.
Kevin spent 34 years on the production line here. He's relieved he's keeping his job, but he doesn't know how long for.
You can't think long term. I mean, I've just gone out and done a private coach driving licence. That's how much confidence I've got in the place.
You're preparing for another job?
Yes. I've paid for a coach driving licence myself. That's how much confidence I've got.
When do you think you'll need to use it?
When they say they're going to close the place.
So you think it's when, not if?
Yeah.
This Kevin's also pleased to be keeping the job he's had since the 80s, but he isn't celebrating. He's worried pensions are being traded in to keep the plant open.
You know, I hope they don't take things off the pension. That's my heart and view. And a lot of boys in there at the moment, like, who've got a lot of service in, you know, worked hard for this pension. You know what I mean? A long time, 20 years, 30 years, and people there longer.
So giving that pension up won't feel like a win?
No, not at all, not at all.
Changes to pensions are part of the proposed deal, and the agreement only looks as far as 5 years ahead. But for workers who once thought they might be unemployed this Christmas, this is good news for now.
Let's hear some more details about this proposed deal then. It is 5 years that they've guaranteed to make steel with 2 blast furnaces behind me, but the investment plan Tata have unveiled is a bit longer than that, 10 years at a cost of £1 billion, they say. But Tata have admitted themselves 2016 has been tough.
These were troubling times, and it has been extremely difficult time for everybody, losing a lot of money. The tailwinds that we see now were not predicted. But most importantly, our employees have really worked hard on a turnaround plan.
It's really hard to overestimate just how important that plant is to this town. It's not just the people working here, but so many businesses in Port Talbot which depend on it, from places that make things with steel to cafes and pubs. A lot of people in Port Talbot tonight will be breathing a sigh of relief.
I'm sure. Dominic, thank you very much. Let's bring you some other news now. And the shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer has told Parliament there is no mandate for a hard Brexit. He was speaking during a Commons debate over the government's timetable for leaving the European Union. Tonight, MPs will vote on the Prime Minister's plan to trigger Article 50 in March next year. Meanwhile, police have arrested a man in connection with threats made to Gina Miller. She's the businesswoman spearheading the Brexit legal challenge. Ms Miller says she received racist messages following her decision to take the government to court. And after months of fighting, Syrian rebels have left the last areas they held in Aleppo's old quarter. It means government forces now control about 3/4 of eastern Aleppo, areas which had been held by the rebels for the past 4 years. Meanwhile, Theresa May has joined Barack Obama and other world leaders in condemning Russia over its role in the humanitarian disaster. The drugs giant Pfizer has been handed a record fine for overcharging the NHS. They raised the price of their anti-epilepsy drug by 2,600% overnight. Let's talk to our health correspondent, Catherine Jones, who's with me. Catherine, tell us more about this drug.
Well, this is all about a drug that 48,000 people rely on to prevent them getting epileptic seizures. Now, it used to be given out under the name Epanutin, a branded drug, and it cost the NHS £2.83 for a supply. Now, in 2012, Pfizer decided instead to distribute it as a generic medicine in the UK. It changed its name and it changed its price to £67.50 for the same amount of medicine. Let me stress, same capsules inside, just a different package.
That is an astonishing rise. Why did it go up so much?
Well, with branded drugs, because they tend to be more expensive, the NHS has powers to get a good deal with the manufacturer. But when it comes to generic copies of drugs, they don't have the same powers of price regulation. In this case, that meant that the cost to the NHS in 1 year, 2012, was £2 million. The next year, 2013, it had risen to £50 million a year. The competition watchdog said today Pfizer had just gone too far.
They took the opportunity of taking the drug out of price regulation, which is fine and legal, and then exploited that to increase prices to the NHS, not by 10% or 25%, but by between 780% and 2,600%. And the victims of that are the NHS and all who use the NHS, because the money could be spent on other things, and us all as taxpayers.
So a record fine then for Pfizer. How much?
£84 million for Pfizer, and they've got to bring the price of the drug down to a reasonable level. It, however, is fighting this. It's rejecting the decision, appealing and saying its branded version of the drug was losing it money. The price of the generic copy was still substantially cheaper than the alternatives on the market. Now, interestingly, belatedly, the government woke up to this issue 3 months ago, started putting legislation through Parliament. By next spring, there should be a new law that will prevent, or at least clamp down, on firms trying to charge high prices to the NHS.
OK, Kathy, thanks very much. Coming up on 5 News. 75 years on, the survivors of Pearl Harbor relive their terrifying ordeal. And how Cruz Beckham is making his own way in the fame game, aged just 11. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Now, how can you make a child's life as rewarding as possible when that child is facing a terminal illness? And what does that diagnosis mean for the rest of the family? Well, it's a very difficult and, of course, emotive subject, but one that around 40,000 families have to face. And today, the health watchdog NICE issued new guidelines to try to help them. Our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman, reports.
Tori Barrow's daughter Lena had a rare life-limiting condition. But when she was 7 and her health deteriorated, there was no real plan for the end of her life. She passed away in a small hospital room with no space for her 6 siblings, so they couldn't say a final goodbye.
People can't take that pain away, but if things had been better, it would have been more peaceful. If we had perhaps been able to bring her home or have the children around her or go to a hospice. And then maybe there wasn't time for that, but there would have been time to be there as a family.
That's exactly what new guidelines from NICE on end-of-life care are seeking to avoid.
On Christmas morning, you come downstairs.
Stephanie Nimmo's daughter Daisy is as excited about Christmas as any other 11-year-old. She has 2 older brothers and a sister too. They are all supported by Shooting Star Chase Children's Hospice and feel as prepared as they can be for what's ahead.
It's really important that when it is Daisy's time to go, that we do the right thing for her, that we support her and we support her wishes, regardless of the fact that she has a learning disability, regardless of the fact that her care is really complicated. It's really important that we do the right thing for Daisy and for my other children as well.
NICE wants carers and medics to talk to children about ambitions, make bucket lists even, to make end-of-life plans as individual as possible.
We want everybody to be sensitive to the needs of the child and their family, because although it's absolutely a tragic thing to happen, the advice we've been given is that if the situation is managed as sensitively as possible, with as much support as possible, it can provide some long-term comfort.
No one knows how Daisy's condition will develop, but she knows she wants to celebrate Christmas, watch Frozen on Ice and go to senior school. It's her plan, and following it should help all of her family. Tessa Chapman, 5 News.
All bird keepers, from poultry farmers to families with a few chickens, have been ordered to keep them inside for a month to protect the UK from an outbreak of bird flu. The H5N8 avian flu strain has been found in poultry and wild birds in 14 countries across mainland Europe, including Germany and France. Britain's last remaining fixed-wing aircraft carrier has left Portsmouth for the final time after being sold off for scrap. The Ministry of Defence announced earlier this year that HMS Illustrious had been sold for more than £2 million to a ship recycling company in Turkey. And Donald Trump has been named Time magazine's Person of the Year. The US President-elect said it was a great honour which meant a lot to him. He was chosen from a shortlist that included Russian President Vladimir Putin and the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage. A date which will live in infamy. That was how President Roosevelt described the 7th of December 1941, when Japanese fighter planes attacked the US naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, leaving thousands dead or wounded. 75 years on, ceremonies are being held to remember those men and women who died in the battle that prompted America's entry into the Second World War. Olivia Kinsley reports.
It's taken these veterans 75 years to return to Hawaii. They survived the Pearl Harbor attack and have been reliving it in their minds ever since. The onslaught began at 8 a.m. The Japanese rained bombs on the American warships, which sank with thousands inside.
The fireball got us all, and I don't know how I made it, but I'm here.
1,177 men died on Donald Stratton's ship. He was severely injured and was in hospital for a year.
I got medically discharged, and I was out for a year, and I re-enlisted and went back in and went to boot camp again in Farragut, Idaho.
Pulled bodies and people off the fire. They were coming out of the fire, and we were going to lay them down on the deck till we get them into the boats to get them to the hospital. And after about 40 minutes, we were getting water on the quarterdeck up to our knees. And
the Japanese attack finally brought America into the Second World War.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
At the USS Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor, President Obama came to remember the dead. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will also come here in a few weeks' time, the first sitting Japanese leader to do so. The memorial is built on the very spot the Arizona sank 75 years ago. The old wounds it left are still healing, but hope and reconciliation float today. Olivia Kinsley, 5 News.
Now, do you recognise this young man? Well, what if I told you his mother's a pop star turned fashion designer and his father a footballer turned model? Oh, and that his brothers once signed for Premier League youth teams. Quite a tall order for Cruz Beckham then to make his mark. But what do you know? He's released a Christmas single and he's not even a teenager yet. Minnie Stevenson reports.
Cruz Beckham, everybody!
Now, he may only be 11, but today Cruz Beckham released his first ever single. He even sang it on the radio.
If every day was Christmas and I can be with you underneath the mistletoe, kissing where nobody knows.
Cruz's debut is called If Every Day Was Christmas. You could argue every day is Christmas when you're a Beckham. Today, in one of his first ever interviews, David and Victoria's son told the world the inspiration behind his song.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's two of my favourite things, singing and Christmas. And
That's so cute.
And it's amazing to put them together, and the money's going to charity.
Dad even made a brief cameo.
You must be really proud of him, David.
Really proud. I mean, he's having fun, he's enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly.
Cruz, of course, follows the artist formerly known as Posh. Although Victoria recently admitted in an interview that as a Spice Girl, they would often turn off her mic and just let the others sing.
And I sure would like some sweet company.
As for Cruz's solo career, his first Instagram post of him singing has been watched nearly 400,000 times. It's thought the singer's already been signed by Justin Bieber's manager.
The Beckham family are so hardworking and have, tried their hand at so many things. We've seen Victoria go from a Spice Girl to a successful fashion designer, and now it's the children who are having a stab at fame and giving it a go.
Recently, the Beckham kids have been busy. Eldest, 17-year-old Brooklyn, is releasing his own photography book. 14-year-old Romeo is already a Burberry model, and at 5, Harper is naturally making a name for herself with the Front Row Fashion Brigade.
If every day was Christmas.
As for Cruz's single, the bookies are already predicting it could be Christmas #1. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Mistletoe, kissing where nobody knows.
So nothing that family can't do. Before we go, Matt has joined us to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight.
He's no Cliff Richard, is he? Not yet, anyway. We'll be discussing the pros and cons. We'll give him time. We'll be discussing the pros and cons of fame at a young age. We'd like to know your thoughts. Is 11 just too young to be thrust into the limelight, or was it always going to be so for a Beckham offspring? Comment on our Facebook page, search there for C5 News. And to help me discuss some of the issues, I'll be joined by this young starlet.
You really don't have the time. You got
Yeah, it's Molly Rainford, who was just 11 when she made the finals of Britain's Got Talent back in 2012. I'll be asking her how life has been since then. Plus, we'll be hearing from adventurer Sir Ranulph Fiennes from the bottom of the world. He's just climbed the highest mountain on Antarctica, 16,000 feet, temperatures of -30, and he's not even halfway through his latest challenge, Sian. That's real talent.
It is real. I bet you're quite talented at 11.
Yeah, I couldn't climb a mountain or sing.
No, never mind. That's it for now. Claire Nazir has the weather for you next. I will see you again tomorrow at 5. Matt, of course, back at 6:30. Thanks for watching tonight. Goodbye for now.